I found myself frowning more and more these days. Sometimes it's because of socks left on the floor, sometimes when I'm talking to someone and they suddenly look down at their phone, and sometimes when I've been standing in line too long and the person in front of me is moving too slowly. I sigh without meaning to. I used to think becoming an adult meant learning to be more tolerant, that my heart would grow broader with age. But now, I often feel my emotions explode more easily than they did when I was a child. The only difference is, the explosions are more hidden, more polite, and somehow even more suffocating. One day, while scrolling through short videos, I came across a line. You didn't become an adult. You became the kind of adult you hated as a child. I stared at that sentence and suddenly felt the urge to cry. Not because it was an accusation, but because it felt like a reminder that I'm walking down a path I once swore I'd never take. When I was young, my dad had a temper. One winter, I was a little slow doing my homework. He slammed open the door and yelled, "Why do you always dawdle like this? What the hell do you want?" I didn't say anything. I didn't dare. That feeling, that I had tried so hard and it still wasn't enough, was like a sticky rice ball stuck in my throat. Hard to swallow, painful to bear. I told myself, when I grow up, I'll never be like him. I'll never lash out. I'll speak kindly. I'll understand when someone is already doing their best. But now, when I help my younger cousin with homework, I find myself saying, "What exactly are you trying to do? I thought I was going to be a different kind of adult. But am I just repeating the very patterns I once wanted to escape? Is adulthood just a process of unconsciously wrapping the pain we endured in a new shell, and then inflicting it on others?" I later learned there's a term for this: pattern replication. It doesn't mean you're deliberately imitating someone. It means your body has subconsciously memorized a way of handling relationships and expressing emotions. You think you've chosen to be a calm, rational adult, but your subconscious has already internalized your parents' tone, their reactions, their silences. It reminds me of a small moment. At a class reunion, I was in charge of ordering food. I placed the order a bit late, and the delivery was delayed. The teacher joked, "How will you ever run a household like this?" Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but my stomach clenched. That sentence reminded me of how my mom used to scold me. "You can't even cook a meal. How are you going to survive?" I didn't talk back. I just lowered my head and kept eating. But that moment made me realize something. I overreact to harmless teasing. Not because of the words themselves, but because of the familiar tone of "you're not good enough." That was how I was treated growing up. And it became the way I treated myself. I would study alone late at night, not because studying was important, but because I couldn't afford to fail. I would give my partner the silent treatment for days, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know any other way. It's not that we don't want to love well. It's just that we've never been loved well ourselves. We were never taught how to express ourselves, how to communicate, how to be gentle yet firm. So we replicate. We hate what they did to us, and then we silently become them. Not because we've forgiven them, but because we don't know another way. The words we use were taught to us by them. The emotions we perform were acted out by them. Even our so-called politeness was learned through biting our tongues. Saying, "I don't want to become like them," sounds like clarity. But the real challenge is when you realize you've already become them and you don't hate yourself for it. Because finally you understand, they weren't born that way. They were once kids too. Afraid of being scolded, desperate to be liked, but they never learned a better way. So are we doomed to become them? I've asked myself that many times. Can I stop feeling guilty for days just because of one sentence someone said? Can I avoid drawing emotional daggers during arguments? Can I stop using indifference and toughness as my definition of maturity? Can I stop becoming the adult I used to hate? The answer is yes, but not by simply telling myself don't. It starts with knowing who I am. There's a simple psychological concept called self-differentiation, the ability to stay grounded in who you are, even in moments of emotional intensity or in the presence of conflicting voices, especially from your family of origin. It doesn't mean cutting off emotions or relationships. It means finding a clear sense of self within them. This is incredibly hard, especially if you grew up in an environment where expression was discouraged. If, as a child, expressing dissatisfaction got you labeled as defiant, expressing sadness got you called dramatic, then repression and obedience became your norm. And when you grow up, finding that muted self again is like trying to recover a forgotten name from the bottom of the sea. But it's not impossible. Sometimes all it takes is realizing you are not them. You've only learned to act like them. And that gives you the power to choose differently. I have a friend whose mother constantly told him, "Don't be too showy." As an adult, he became extremely cautious at work, never drawing attention, never speaking up. One time, his manager moved him off a project, saying, "You're too passive to lead." He cried that night and told me, "It's not that I don't have ideas, I'm just too scared to share them." So he started a new habit. Before every meeting, he'd write down 3 things he wanted to say, and force himself to speak them, even if he was sweating. At first his voice was barely audible, but eventually he found his voice. He told me, "I don't want to be dragged around by my childhood fears anymore." I was proud of him. Not because he forgot the past, but because he recognized the scared little boy inside and told him, "This time, I'll walk with you." There's a line I love. True growth is not becoming less like your childhood self. It's finally being able to protect that child. If you weren't heard as a kid, listen to yourself now. If you craved understanding, try to understand others now. You don't have to be perfect, but you don't have to keep repeating the past either. So how do we stop replicating and start becoming ourselves? Most of us aren't really growing up. We're just delaying replication. Scared of conflict as children, we become adults who fear expressing ourselves. Grew up suppressing emotions, we learn to suppress others instead. It's not that we want to become the adults we hated. It's just that no one ever taught us any other way. And becoming yourself, it's not some sudden epiphany. It's choosing a different answer in situations that feel painfully familiar. You can start with 3 small steps. 1. Pause. Before snapping, pleasing, or retreating into silence, pause for 3 seconds. Ask yourself, do I really want to do this? Is this truly my choice? Those 3 seconds. That's the distance between you and replication. 2. Reconnect with your body. Growth isn't about becoming more rational. It's reconnecting rationality with feeling. You might have grown up telling yourself, "I'm fine," ignoring sadness, pushing through exhaustion. Eventually, you stop knowing whether you're truly happy. I've been there. People said I was so strong. But I didn't feel any joy because I was disconnected from my own body. Now I ask myself 2 questions before bed. When did I feel a little joy today? When did I feel hurt? You don't have to answer anyone else. But by noticing, you slowly rebuild the connection. And that connection gives you the power to choose differently. 3. Practice safe expression, especially of emotion. Start with someone you trust, or just write it in your phone notes. I now keep a folder of kind words from friends, colleagues, even strangers. It's not vanity. It's a psychological anchor I use to resist the old patterns. No one taught you how to express yourself as a child, but as an adult you can learn. Expression isn't weakness. It's self-respect. If childhood shaped you, adulthood gives you the power to reshape yourself. Not for others, but to become the adult you yourself don't hate. I remember having dinner with a difficult relative. His words were harsh, his tone biting. I felt anger rising. I nearly snapped back. But I paused those 3 seconds. I asked myself, do I want to win this argument? Or do I just not want to be controlled by this kind of cruelty anymore? So I didn't snap. I didn't appease either. I calmly stated my boundary and fell silent. As I walked out of the restaurant, I felt so light. Not because I had won, but because I had chosen not to replicate my father's rage or my mother's silence. For once, I had chosen my own response. We will all become adults someday, but we don't have to become the kind of adults we once feared. Growing up is, in many ways, a practice in forgiveness. Not forgiving others for their wrongs, but forgiving our younger selves for not knowing better. Forgiving ourselves for not learning it all at once. You may one day realize, the adults you hated as a child were, more often than not, just kids trying to survive. They were wrong, Yes. But the reason we want to break the cycle isn't to defend them, it's to make sure the pain doesn't get passed on. A friend once told me, "My biggest fear isn't becoming like my dad, exploding with emotion. It's becoming like him and not even realizing it." I went quiet, and I thought we will all become adults. But we can choose to be aware. And in this world, one of the hardest things is to be yourself without hurting others. But if you have awareness, intention, and practice, you're already no longer the adult you once feared, you're already on a different path. Have you ever had this feeling? That once you start understanding your parents, it somehow hurts more? Because you finally see why they became the way they are. Maybe no one ever reached out a hand when they needed one. But you also realize, understanding alone isn't enough. You have to create new ways. You have to sort through the emotions that have been stuck for years. You have to carve out your own identity, step by painful step. It's not easy. But if you've had the courage to even doubt, you've already gone further than they ever did. As kids, we thought growing up meant finding answers. Now we know. Growing up means learning to ask the right questions. Who am I? How do I want to live? What kind of adult do I want to be? And what am I willing to give for that version of myself? There are no standard answers, but the questions will slowly pull you out of replication and toward a clearer, truer self. And finally, if you've read this far, I want to ask you to do one thing. Close your eyes. Picture yourself as a child. Maybe you're sitting shyly in a corner. Maybe you're watching adults, carefully reading their moods. Maybe you're holding back tears with all your might. Walk over to that child, kneel down, and gently say, "I'm here now that I've grown up, that I may not be very strong, but I'll do my best to protect you, and I won't let you relive the same pain again." In that moment, you'll realize you haven't just become an adult. You've become the kind of adult you needed all along. And that is where replication ends.